Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never wanted to admit it out loud, but I could feel from the very first mile of that trip that something was wrong. The kind of wrong you don't notice with your eyes at first, but with the skin on your arms, tightening with every passing minute. I told myself it was just the weather, just the kind of storm that presses down on your chest like a hand and makes you forget how to breathe normally. But when the rain started pounding the windshield so hard that the wipers screeched in protest, I knew deep down it was more than that. Ryan's hands were locked tight on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, jaw clenched. I could see his reflection in the streaked glass, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't want to talk. Not about the storm, not about how tired we both were, not about the argument that had lingered between us since yesterday. Silence stretched out like a third passenger in the car, heavier than the rain. I kept scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself, trying to find us somewhere, anywhere, we could stay. The screen cast a glow across my hands, trembling with the rhythm of the car fighting the water on the asphalt. "There's a place, Redwood Motel, 5 miles up, cheap." I said it quietly like I was already apologizing for even suggesting it. Ryan didn't look at me. Not much of a choice, huh? I hated that I could hear the defeat in his voice. It wasn't anger, not this time. It was something colder, something that sounded like giving up. The highway stretched on, empty and endless. Streetlights grew fewer, weaker, until there were none at all, just the beam of our headlights cutting into sheets of black rain. My chest tightened. I tried to tell myself it was only exhaustion, but the further we drove, the more I felt like we were sliding into a place where we didn't belong. When we finally turned into the Redwood Motel's lot, I wanted to laugh at how cliché it looked, except nothing about it was funny. The neon sign flickered red, buzzing faintly in the storm, and the light it cast made the cracked pavement look like it was bleeding. The building was squat, 2 levels of dark windows, and the only glow came from the office. Inside, a man sat slouched behind a yellowed counter, his eyes glued to a small, static-filled TV. Ryan killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed into my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. We ran through the rain to the office. The bell clanged when Ryan pushed the door open, and the sound felt like it didn't belong, like something sharp in a room that should have stayed muffled. The man lifted his head slowly, too slowly, like his neck had forgotten how to move. His eyes were clouded, unfocused, and for a moment I had the chilling thought that maybe he wasn't really looking at us at all, but through us. "You need a room?" His voice was rough, like it had been scraped against sandpaper. Ryan hesitated. "Just for the night?" The man stared for so long that my stomach started to twist. Then he slid an old key across the counter. "Room 6, no visitors, no noise after midnight." His gaze had already drifted back to the TV. I wanted to ask what he meant by no noise, but the words stuck in my throat. Ryan tried to laugh as we walked away. "Just an old motel, Em, don't freak out." But I was already freaking out. I could feel it, the way the air clung to me as we stepped into the room, thick with mildew and the sour-sweet tang of old cigarettes. A no-smoking sign hung crooked on the wall, ignored like everything else here. The carpet squished faintly under my shoes, as though it had soaked up years of things that didn't belong. "God, I don't like this," I whispered. Ryan kissed my cheek, perfunctory, automatic. One night, first thing in the morning, we're out. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to sink into sleep and let morning rescue us. But the room didn't feel like a place that allowed rest. The battered furniture sagged, the TV looked like it belonged in a junkyard, and the deadbolt was the only thing between us and the hallway. I pressed my hand to the cold metal, testing it, needing to know it would hold. I should have listened to myself when the knocking started. It was soft at first, 3 taps that barely rose above the rain. Ryan froze, his phone still in his hand, eyes darting to me. "Emily?" I shook my head. "I'm in here." Another knock, harder this time. Ryan moved toward the door, slow, careful, like every inch of his body resisted. He pressed his eye to the peephole. I watched his shoulders stiffen. Nothing, no one. He tried to laugh, but it came out strained. Probably the wind. But the deadbolt clicked anyway as he locked it tight. I lay awake for hours, the sound of rain drumming against the window mixing with the echo of those knocks in my skull. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to scratching. At first, I thought it was inside the room, the sharp, irregular drag of something across the wall. But when I turned my head, I saw it. A shadow pressed against the glass, its outline smeared by the rain but unmistakably human. My throat closed. My whole body went rigid. "Ryan," I whispered, shaking him until he jolted upright. "Someone's outside." He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and I hated how badly his hands shook. "Stay here." But he left anyway. The silence when he stepped outside was unbearable. I strained to hear anything. His footsteps, his voice, the crunch of gravel. But the only sound was the storm. When he came back, pale and breathless, I wanted to scream at him for leaving me alone. "There's no one out there," he said, too fast. But I could see it in his face. He didn't believe it either. At 4 a.m., the doorknob rattled. This time there was no mistaking it. The metal twisted violently, the door shuddering in its frame. Ryan snatched the lamp like a weapon. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, the knock. Slow, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep from sobbing. Ryan tried calling 911. No signal. The screen glared back at us, useless. "We have to get out," I whispered. The knocking stopped. Footsteps dragged away, echoing down the hall. We didn't wait. We shoved our things into bags, opened the door, and ran. The hallway was empty, too empty, the kind of empty that feels staged. My pulse roared in my ears. When we reached the car, Ryan's keys slipped in his shaking hands. I shoved him, screamed at him, until the engine finally turned over. We peeled out of the lot, gravel spitting behind us. Only then did I look at him, ready to cry, ready to laugh, ready to collapse. "Ryan, are you okay?" He turned to me. His face was hollow. His lips moved, but no sound came. And then I realized he hadn't answered me because he wasn't Ryan anymore. Blood slicked his shirt, soaking through, the dark stain spreading from his throat. I gasped, clawing at his shoulder, but he slumped forward, lifeless. The car swerved. Headlights bounced wildly across the road. I screamed his name, tried to pull him upright, tried to breathe through the terror clawing at my chest. I don't remember how I got the car stopped. I only remember the silence afterward, the suffocating silence that felt like it was listening. When I looked up into the rearview mirror, the Redwood Motel sign glowed faintly in the distance, pulsing red like a heartbeat. And beneath it, a figure stood, watching. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking. Hours, maybe. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, I drove to a gas station, Ryan's body cold beside me. My hands were sticky with his blood. The woman behind the counter took one look at me and her face changed. "You okay, honey?" My voice cracked. We stayed at the Redwood Motel. Someone killed him." Her eyes darkened and she shook her head slowly. "Redwood's been closed for years." I couldn't breathe. "A couple was murdered there back in the 90s. Room 6. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They say the killer never left. Some folks think he waits for people like you to wander in." I staggered back to the car, bile rising in my throat. And that's when I saw it. On the fogged rear window, traced in something wet and red. "You were supposed to stay." My scream tore out of me before I even knew it was happening. Because in that moment, I finally understood. The danger wasn't behind us. It had come with me. And maybe it always had. I don't remember the moment we pulled off the highway so much as the feeling it gave me. The way my stomach sank, like I'd stepped off a ledge in the dark without meaning to. The motel sign flickered weakly against the night sky, its buzzing neon tubes casting a pale, sickly glow over cracked pavement and sagging walls. It wasn't the kind of place you chose. It was the kind you ended up at, because there was nowhere else left. My dad parked our car in the nearly empty lot, the crunch of tires over gravel oddly loud in the stillness. I could already tell this place wasn't right. The air itself felt heavy, thick with exhaustion after hours on the road. My mom rubbed her temples silently, staring at the peeling paint and drooping roofline like she was silently weighing whether sleeping in the car might be safer. My younger brother Caleb yawned so wide I could hear his jaw pop. I should have been relieved. We'd been driving since sunset, but all I could think was that something about this place felt wrong in a way I couldn't quite name yet. "This is the best we're gonna get tonight," Dad muttered, voice sandpapered from fatigue. His knuckles stayed tight on the steering wheel, like he needed to grip it for balance. No service means no GPS, no calls, no finding something better. No one argued. Maybe none of us had the energy left to. But when Dad got out and walked toward the lobby, I noticed the way my mom's eyes kept shifting nervously, scanning the rows of doors. They looked like teeth in a rotting mouth. Room after room, chipped paint, rust-streaked doorknobs, curtains drawn too tightly shut. Through the glass of the office, I caught a glimpse of the man behind the counter. He was old, so still he looked almost waxen, flipping slowly through a newspaper that seemed a decade too old, its pages yellowed and curling at the edges. The air smelled faintly of wet carpet even before we opened our doors. When Dad returned, a single brass key dangled from a cracked plastic tag. Room 6. The room was everything I expected and worse. The stale reek of cigarettes clung to the yellowed wallpaper, despite the no smoking sign that hung crookedly above the door. 2 narrow beds sagged under thin, scratchy blankets. The bathroom door was half swollen from water damage, its frame mottled with black mildew. An old box TV sat crooked on a dresser, its remote taped together. $20 a night, Dad said, tossing the key onto the nightstand with a kind of finality. Can't expect much for that. I sat down on the bed closest to the window, my skin crawling at the sticky fabric. My phone, when I checked it, stared back at me with the same empty signal bars. No service, no Wi-Fi, just silence. I muttered under my breath, "Great, no internet." Mom, already pulling a worn paperback from her bag, didn't look up. "Try reading a book," she said softly, like she always did when I complained. Caleb sprawled across the other bed without ceremony, face buried in the pillow. Dad flicked through the TV, settling on a grainy, static-laced news channel that looked like it was being broadcast from another lifetime. The air conditioner rattled to life, coughing dust into the room. I closed my eyes and told myself I'd sleep, but sleep didn't come easy. The air tasted metallic, like old pennies, and every creak of the building above us pressed against my chest. It was the sound that woke me, or maybe the silence between sounds. At first, I wasn't sure. I blinked at the glowing red numbers of the alarm clock, 3:12 a.m. Then I heard it, a faint metallic scrape, the rattle of the doorknob. I froze. My whole body tightened, breath caught mid-chest. Maybe it was the wind, maybe the air conditioner kicking back off. But then it came again, deliberate, slow, the sound of someone testing the lock. The hair on my arms rose as if pulled by invisible strings. My eyes darted to my family. Caleb snored softly. My mom's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Dad's hand twitched on the bed beside him, but he didn't wake. I wanted to look out the window, but before I could move, footsteps creaked across the gravel outside. Slow, measured, stopping just beside our curtain. A shadow passed across it, a shape too tall, too sharp-edged to be nothing. My throat tightened. I pressed my hand against Dad's arm. "Dad," I whispered. My voice cracked. "Dad, someone's at the door." His eyes opened instantly, sharp even in exhaustion. He sat up, listening. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then, bang. The fist against the door reverberated through the entire frame. Caleb shot up with a cry, eyes wide, half smeared with sleep. Mom gasped, clutching the blanket to her chest like armor. Dad was already on his feet, dragging the chair from the corner and shoving it under the knob. "Who's there?" he called. His voice was firm, but I heard the strain in it. No answer, just another bang, louder, harder. The door shuddered visibly. The air was too heavy to breathe. My chest squeezed tighter with every silence between blows. Then it stopped. Footsteps again, retreating this time, fading. We didn't move. Not until the silence stretched so long it felt unbearable. Even then, none of us dared close our eyes. By morning, the light felt pale and artificial, doing little to shake the night's grip. Dad went to the front desk, came back with his jaw set like stone. The old man just shrugged. He said flatly, "Said it happens sometimes. Don't leave the door unlocked." That was it. No concern. No explanation. Just casual dismissal, like we'd asked about leaky plumbing. We left, piling silently into the car. The gravel crunched under the tires like brittle bones snapping. When service returned to our phones, no one reached for music, no one tried small talk. Silence followed us, thick and accusing, but the silence wasn't empty, not for me. At every gas station, I felt eyes lingering a second too long. At rest stops, shadows seemed to stretch a little farther toward me. Caleb whispered once, his voice too quiet for Mom to hear. "What if they followed us?" Dad's hands clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. They didn't. But his voice didn't sound like he believed it. I tried, I really did. But when we reached our destination, when everyone else settled back into routine, something inside me wouldn't settle. Nights were the worst. Every sound against the window, every creak in the hallway dragged me back to that door, to that hand rattling the knob. I searched online one night, unable to stop myself. I typed the motel's name into every search bar I could find, scrolling past endless pages of junk results, until finally, I found something. An old forum thread, buried deep. Someone had written about room 6. The story was almost identical. The rattling door handle, the footsteps, the pounding on the door. But in their case, the lock hadn't held. I woke up to someone standing inside my room. The post ended. That was it. No follow-up. No explanation. Just silence. And even now, when I close my eyes, I see the shadow behind the curtain. I hear the scrape of the handle, slow and deliberate. And I wonder, not if they followed us, but if they're still waiting, if they ever left at all. I felt it the moment I pulled into the parking lot. The quiet kind of wrongness that doesn't announce itself, just seeps into you until you notice your shoulders tightening, your pulse quickening for no reason. Maybe it was the way the blue motel sign sputtered against the wind like it was too tired to keep glowing. Maybe it was how the parking lot looked half abandoned, filled with sun-faded sedans and dented work trucks that might not even run anymore. Or maybe it was just me, tired, frayed, and carrying the kind of silence you don't shake off no matter how many miles you drive. I told myself not to think about it, not to think about him. The drive had been long, too long, and the whole way I kept catching myself checking the rearview mirror, scanning headlights to see if the same pair had been following me since the last town. I wasn't supposed to think like that anymore. I wasn't supposed to let him live in my head. But you don't just unlearn fear. You carry it with you. Inside, the check-in counter smelled of dust and sour coffee. The night manager barely looked up when I slid my ID across the counter. His eyes were dull, ringed in gray shadows, one hand wrapped in a bandage stained at the edges. He asked my name without much interest, his voice flat, like even that little effort was too much. And I felt a strange relief at that. His eyes didn't linger on mine. He didn't look like anyone I knew. He didn't seem to know me either. Just another stranger in a blur of strangers. That was all I wanted to be. My room was upstairs, at the far end, next to a broken-down air conditioning unit that groaned and rattled like it might tear itself apart. The wallpaper peeled in strips, curling at the edges like paper tongues. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew, and something else I couldn't name, a sour, sweet odor that seemed to rise whenever the unit sputtered to life. The view from the window wasn't any better. A gas station across the street, neon lights flickering in a way that made my eyes ache if I looked too long. This wasn't a place anyone came to stay. It was a place to wait. Still, it was clean enough, and the lock worked. That was all I needed. That night I went out, met some old friends. We drank, we laughed. I pretended for a few hours that everything was fine, that I wasn't still half waiting for a number I'd blocked to call again. By the time I returned, the motel was quiet, pressed flat under the weight of midnight. The lobby looked exactly as I'd left it, the night manager with his bandaged hand staring at his phone without moving like he was frozen mid-thought. I passed quickly. The stairwell groaned under my feet. In the hallway, every sound seemed amplified. My footsteps, my breathing, the scrape of my keycard as I unlocked the door. Inside, the room was unchanged. But I checked the lock twice, then a third time. That was habit. The next morning, the dining area was little more than a corner off the lobby. 2 tables, a toaster with crumbs burned into the tray, and fruit that looked as though it had been left out too long. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust hidden under bleach. That's when I saw him. He was sitting alone in the corner, thin, pale, hair the color of damp earth. A black t-shirt, dark jeans, ordinary in every way except for the way his eyes were locked on me. At first I thought he was staring into nothing, but then I realized, no. He was staring at me, directly, and he didn't look away. It wasn't the quick awkwardness of strangers meeting by accident. It wasn't even curiosity. His stare was flat, unblinking, empty, but somehow too direct, too deliberate, like he was studying me for something he already knew, like he'd been waiting. A cold ripple spread through me, and I forced my eyes down to my plate. The toast was brittle, tasteless. My hands trembled when I reached for the coffee, and every time I risked another glance, his gaze was still there. I left as quickly as I could, pretending not to notice. All day, I tried to lose the memory of his face among my friends, but when I returned, exhausted, the lobby's dim light seemed thicker than before. And there he was again. The same corner, the same posture, the same eyes. He wasn't eating. He wasn't even pretending. Just sitting, as though the entire place existed for him alone. I felt his stare on my back as I climbed the stairs. My pulse thudded in my ears. I told myself it was nothing. He was nothing. But the way my gut twisted told me otherwise. Inside my room, I checked the lock again, and again. Showered until the mirror fogged over as though steam could erase the unease pressing down on me. But thirst finally dragged me toward the door. The tap water smelled like rust and pennies. I couldn't make myself drink it. The vending machine was at the end of the hall. I opened the door, then froze. Because through the peephole he was standing there, directly outside my door. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't moving. Just standing, his body still, his face unreadable in the dim light. I backed away, chest heaving, my phone clutched in my hand. I thought about calling someone, the police. But what could I say? A man is standing in the hall? That wasn't a crime. But inside, I knew it wasn't that simple. When I dared to look again, he was gone. I thought about staying in all night. But thirst gnawed until I cracked the door. The hallway was empty. I moved fast, bought my water, and turned back. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. They followed me, matching my pace. At my door, my hands shook too badly to swipe the card. Red. Again, red. Panic clawed up my throat. The third swipe turned green. the lock clicking open just as the footsteps closed in. I shoved inside, slammed the door, and then something slid under it. A piece of paper, neatly folded. My breath caught as I bent to pick it up. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, written in handwriting I knew too well, was a single sentence. "You can't hide forever." The room spun. That handwriting, his handwriting. But that was impossible. I hadn't seen him in months. I'd left states behind me. I'd changed my number, my name on every booking. He couldn't be here. He couldn't. But the paper was real in my hand. The knock came next, soft, patient, almost polite. I staggered back, clutching the paper, my chest rising and falling too fast. When I called the front desk, my voice cracked. The manager's reply was slow, almost rehearsed. "We'll send someone up." Minutes passed. Then I heard voices in the hall. When I peered through the peephole, I saw the night manager and another staff member, but not him. They asked for a description, but when I tried to give one, the words tangled in my mouth. Thin, pale, brown hair, black t-shirt, and the manager only nodded, his bandaged hand twitching at his side. The next morning, they told me he wasn't a guest, said he'd been slipping in and out of the motel for days, hiding in the laundry room. Said the police took him away, but I didn't believe it. Because when I stepped into the lobby that morning, I noticed something on the wall behind the desk. A faded photo in a cheap frame. A family standing together. The father, the mother, 2 children. The edges of the image had blurred with age, but the face of the boy, thin, pale, short brown hair, looked exactly like him. I left quickly, my stomach in knots. On the road, I kept checking the mirrors. Every few miles, I swore I felt a weight in the air beside me, as though someone invisible sat just inches away. My throat tightened until I could hardly breathe, and then, in the reflection of my wet windshield, I saw him. Not in the back seat, in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. And for a moment, just a flicker, his lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. I slammed the brakes, my body lurching forward, heart clawing against my ribs. I turned. The seat was empty. Just me, and the long, dark road ahead. But the air beside me was colder than it should have been, and deep down, I knew I hadn't left him behind at all. I'd been awake for 3 days straight, convinced I couldn't stop. Sleep felt like surrender, like if I closed my eyes, something would finally catch up to me. My coworkers thought I was reckless for driving these long stretches alone, but they didn't know the truth. I wasn't just running late on deliveries. I was running from something else, something I couldn't name without sounding insane. The highway unspooled like a black ribbon, vanishing into the void ahead. My headlights tunneled through it, carving out just enough road to keep me moving forward. Everything beyond that beam felt like non-existence, like the world dropped away completely if I wasn't looking at it. My chest was tight, my skin buzzing. Every mile marker blurred, every set of dashed lines on the pavement pulling me deeper into some half-dream. My body ached, stiff and mechanical. The only thing keeping me from collapsing was the same thing that had been keeping me awake for 3 nights, the terror of closing my eyes. People laugh when you tell them you're afraid of sleep. They don't understand. Sleep is when it happens. The dreams, the whispers, the half-formed faces grinning at me from the corners of my mind. I thought the road would keep me safe. That motion itself was protection. But after hours of nothingness, even motion felt fragile. I hated stopping, always had. Hotels and motels made me uneasy. Thin walls, strangers nearby, beds saturated with other people's ghosts. But worse than that was stillness. Stillness meant my thoughts caught up to me. Stillness meant she could too. When the green exit sign appeared like an omen out of the dark, my hands tightened on the wheel. Food gas. Lodging. I almost passed it, but my vision swam, and my head tilted in a way I couldn't control. For a split second, I saw her in the rear view, teeth, eyes, grin, and that was enough. I veered for the ramp. The town was hardly more than a shadow. A diner clung to life with a dying neon sign. 2 gas stations hummed faintly under buzzing lamps. But what caught me wasn't those. It was the motel. The Last Chance Motel. That's what the flickering sign said. Its letters burned into the dark, pale yellow like rotting teeth. The building itself was 2 levels, stretched flat against the lot, its windows covered in a faint milky glaze. As if the building itself had cataracts, blind eyes staring outward. There were no cars, no voices, no signs of life. My stomach twisted, but exhaustion won. I pulled into the lot, gravel crunching too loud under my tires. I killed the engine. Silence swallowed me whole. The air outside was unnaturally cold for spring, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I stretched stiff muscles, forcing my legs to move. My shadow trembled under the harsh glow of my headlights before I shut them off. The office door was unlocked. That wasn't right. That wasn't normal. But I told myself not to be paranoid, even though paranoia was the only thing keeping me alive these days. Inside the office was a relic, a scratched counter, fake plants coated in dust, and one fluorescent light overhead that buzzed and flickered like it was about to die. A brass bell sat on the counter. Behind it, the back office door hung slightly ajar, leaking darkness like smoke. I rang the bell once. The sound cracked too loud. Nothing. I rang again, harder. Nothing. My breath hitched, the silence pressing closer, heavier. And then I noticed it. Something small on the counter. A key. Brass, tarnished, a plastic fob attached, cracked and faded with black numbers pressed into it. Room 6. I shouldn't have touched it. But I did. The key was cold, unnaturally so, like it had been resting in a freezer. I slipped it into my pocket without thinking, as if my hands knew something I didn't. I waited another moment. No clerk came. No voices, no footsteps. The unease in my chest spread like poison. Finally, I turned and pushed back into the night. The instant the air hit me, I felt her. That crawl at the back of the neck, the prickle under the skin, the certainty of being watched. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to look around like some paranoid child. I slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, jammed the key in the ignition. The headlights flared, and there she was. A woman's face pressed against the glass of the office window, grinning, her lips stretched too wide, exposing teeth that weren't shaped right, and her eyes, wide, unblinking, locked on me. My pulse spiked. My breath caught. I froze, then thought, leave. And her grin widened, like she'd heard me, like she was mocking me. I floored the gas, tires shrieking against the cracked pavement, gravel spitting behind me as I shot back onto the road. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe. The next hotel was 12 miles away. I made it in half the time, hands shaking, eyes darting at every shadow. The clerk barely looked at me as I fumbled through check-in. I locked the door of my room, set the chain, shoved the chair against the handle. I collapsed on the bed, but there was no relief. My heart wouldn't stop. Every creak in the walls, every distant sound in the hallway made me flinch. I couldn't stop replaying her grin, her eyes, the way her expression had changed when I thought about leaving, like she was inside me. Hours later, I pulled out my phone, desperate for answers, and searched the Last Chance Motel. Closed, permanently. As of that same day. I couldn't sleep. Even when I shut my eyes, I felt her watching me. I shoved my hands under the pillow, but the key dug into my hip. I pulled it out, turned it in my palm. It was warm now. The next morning, daylight dulled my fear but didn't erase it. My body screamed for sleep, but my mind wouldn't allow it. I checked out, but instead of driving home, I found myself turning back. I told myself I needed proof, that I needed to see it in daylight, abandoned, boarded up, harmless. But deep down, I knew the truth. She wanted me back. The drive stretched longer than it should have. The road felt unfamiliar, like it resisted my return. But when the lot finally came into view, it was different. Boarded windows, plywood across the office door, the sign dead. Dust coated everything. Weeds cracked the pavement. It looked like no one had been there for years, but the key in my pocket pulsed with warmth. I swore I heard a faint clicking sound, like metal teeth grinding, and behind the office glass, cloudy, covered in grime, I saw movement, a shadow. Slowly, deliberately, it leaned closer, and it smiled. I never thought I'd find myself running from someone I once loved, but that's what the road was. An escape route stretched thin beneath my tires, a dark vein cutting through nowhere. The highway looked endless, a black ribbon pulled tight under the moonlight, broken only by the dim glow of the headlights slicing through the night. Every time I glanced into the rearview mirror, I expected to see him behind me, his truck lights gaining ground, his silhouette grinning in the driver's seat like he had all the time in the world. Even when the mirror showed nothing but emptiness, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, pacing me, waiting. It was just past midnight, though my body had stopped tracking time somewhere around hour 12 of driving. My girlfriend Lauren sat slumped in the passenger seat, her face pressed against the window, her breath fogging the glass. She'd been fading in and out for the last 2 hours, murmuring little things in her sleep, half-formed words that always made me flinch, as if someone else had spoken them. I should have felt comfort in her presence, the steady rhythm of her chest rising and falling, but the truth was my nerves were wound too tight. Everything felt sharpened, the hum of the tires, the crackle of the old radio, the way the darkness pressed down like a weight. We'd miscalculated how empty this stretch of road would be at night. Towns had thinned into gas stations and gas stations into nothing. I kept glancing at the fuel gauge, not low, but low enough that the thought of running out here, in this silence, made my skin crawl. Then, like a mirage, a flicker of red caught my eye, neon, buzzing faintly against the void. Vacancy. "Hey," I whispered, nudging Lauren's shoulder. "Look." She stirred, blinking herself awake, her voice rough with sleep. "What time is it?" "Past midnight. But we found a place." We rolled off the highway into a gravel lot. The sign read, "Sunset Inn," though the sputtered like it was choking on its own light. The building sprawled low and wide, a single-story block with peeling paint and shuttered curtains. It looked like the kind of place that existed outside of time, the kind where you weren't sure if it had closed decades ago and just forgot to die. "Charming," Lauren muttered, sarcasm coating the word. "It's this or the back seat," I said, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. We climbed out, the night air startlingly cold for spring, carrying with it the smell of damp asphalt and old cigarettes. Inside, the office smelled worse. Musty wood, stale coffee, a faint tang of something like metal. A bell over the door chimed, and from the back emerged an elderly couple. The man was heavy-set, suspenders cutting into his shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal thick, hairy forearms. His face was weathered, eyes small but sharp. His wife was thin, her hair pinned neatly, her smile stretched so wide it looked like a mask. "Welcome, welcome," the woman said, her voice soft but cracking like an old record. "Traveling late, are you?" the man added, stepping behind the counter. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, though the weight of their stares made my throat tight. "Just need a room for the night." "You've come to the right place," the man said, pulling a key from a pegboard. His hand trembled slightly, wrapped in a bandage spotted with something dark. "We've been running this place for years," the woman said, her eyes glimmering. "No better hospitality anywhere." There was something rehearsed about the way they spoke, like a script worn down by repetition, and still, beneath it, a hunger. "Where are you folks headed?" she asked. "Down to the coast," I answered quickly, though I hated giving strangers even that much. Her smile lingered too long, the corners twitching. "Enjoy the rest of your trip," she said, but the way she said it made it sound like a dare. We got room 5, key heavy in my palm. The hallway creaked under our steps, lined with faded floral wallpaper and sconces buzzing faintly, one flickering every few seconds. When we opened the door, the room was exactly what I expected. Stiff bed, cloying floral pattern, a television that looked like it hadn't been turned on since Clinton was in office. Lauren collapsed onto the mattress. "It's a roof," she said, pulling the thin blanket up. I double-locked the door, sliding the chain across. Something in me refused to let it stay unlocked. We lay in silence, the neon hum seeping faintly through the curtains. I tried to close my eyes to rest, but the air felt too still, like the room itself was holding its breath. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. Sometime later, I woke. At first, I thought it was a dream, the faint scratching, like nails dragging slowly across wood. My eyes opened to a thin line of red neon bleeding around the curtains. Lauren was curled away from me, breathing steady. The scratching came again, then a soft thump, deliberate, near the door. My skin prickled. I told myself it was just the wind, the motel settling. I almost convinced myself until I heard it. Footsteps. Inside. Slow. Measured. Crossing the carpet. My breath caught. My heart hammered so loud it filled my ears. I turned my head inch by inch toward Lauren. She was still. Too still. Then I saw it. A shape. At the foot of the bed. Tall, unmoving. Not shadow, not furniture. A silhouette. My stomach dropped. It wasn't Lauren. It wasn't me. It was them. The old couple. They stood there, hands folded, faces pale in the dark, their eyes reflecting what little light bled into the room. The woman tilted her head, smile stretching wider, teeth catching faint light. "Just checking on you, dear," she whispered. The sound was wrong. It crawled down my spine, slick and damp, like her voice had been soaked in something rotten. Lauren jolted upright with a scream. I scrambled for the lamp, fumbling, and when light filled the room, they didn't move. They didn't flinch. They just stood there. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, voice breaking, though anger laced it too. The old man raised a hand. "No need for alarm. We wanted to be sure you were comfortable." Lauren grabbed her phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling the police." The woman's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Oh, sweetheart, that's not necessary." She stepped closer. I moved between them and Lauren, every nerve screaming, "Get out." For a moment, the old man's face twisted, something sharp flashing behind his eyes, but then he nodded. "Our apologies." They left, slow and calm, closing the door behind them. I slammed the lock, slid the chain back, my hands trembling. The police came. The couple admitted to having a master key, claimed they checked on all guests. But the way the officers looked at us told me something else. They knew. They'd heard this before. We left before dawn. Months later, I searched the motel. Sunset Inn had shut down. No reason given. No records. No explanation. Just gone. And here's the part I don't say out loud. Here's the part I never told Lauren. When I woke that night, before I saw them at the foot of the bed, before I heard their whisper, I had felt something on my chest. The weight of hands, cold, holding me down. I thought I dreamed it. I wanted to. But I still feel them sometimes. In the quietest hours, when the house is dark, when I wake for no reason. That pressure on my chest, that weight, like someone is checking in on me, like I never left that room. And I wonder, in the moments before sleep takes me, what would have happened if I hadn't opened my eyes?